I really wanted to start hearing a little bit more of your story about why you came to Louisiana because, we met at Bayou Writers Group and you basically indicated that you had come down here for writing. I don't hear of a ton of people that are super excited to move to Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Yeah. So I've kind of have an interesting journey. I'm not going to lie, Louisiana was not my first pick, but Virginia's a little bit expensive. I actually have family that lives in Texas pretty close. And I had been to Lake Charles maybe once or twice before I actually moved. And so I knew I had an idea kind of the environment that I was getting into. But the main reason that I moved is because I knew what I wanted to write about was going to be the Civil War. And I knew that living in Indiana makes it a little bit more difficult. There's not any major battles there. It's Lincoln's boyhood home. And that's kind of what you always hear about. So at one point, I had just graduated high school and I knew that I wanted to get into some sort of writing. And I knew that I wanted to do the Civil War writing, which I can get into later. And one of my teachers was encouraging me to actually write out all this history that I had planned. And then another one of my teachers was like, you should travel. And I'm like, you put those two together and it kind of makes a cake. So I went out to Virginia and I was trying to kind of gather up some inspiration and some research for what I wanted to do. And at one point, I went to the Civil War Museum out in Richmond and they had this giant bulletin board that was like the size of the wall. And it was an entire map of the United States. And in all the states, they have all these little dots and all these like little points marking where all the battlefields and stuff were and all this Civil War history. And I looked down to Louisiana and I mean, it's just decorated. And I didn't really want to move to another state, but Louisiana I was kind of familiar with and I had family kind of close. So I started thinking about it some more and like I said, I knew some people and they're like, you know what, come on down. And I was like, okay. So that's what I did.
If you don't mind unpacking for us now, I mean, so was it that important to you? Why was the Civil War important enough to you for you to move right after high school?
No, that's a great question. The Civil War is one that seems to follow me around a lot. And I knew like when I was born in Philadelphia. So my family already comes from like a history background. They're all history nerds. They know everything there's to know. But it's more of like the Revolutionary War than it is the Civil War. So it's kind of like I wanted to find my own way. And then whenever I was probably about 8 years old, I actually lived in Kentucky for a while and I lived right across the Ohio River from Indiana. So Indiana was still pretty close. And I lived in such a small town, we didn't even have a grocery store. So like you always had to go to Indiana for something. And where I used to live was actually an old like a plantation. It was an abandoned plantation at one point. So they would have the historical society come out and they would do digs and stuff like in my backyard. It was the coolest thing ever to an 8 year old. And I got to kind of start to actually understand the history of it. And it was something that resonated so much with me at that time, just being able to see these objects that they would find in the ground and getting home from school and just going to the cemetery or the broken down house in the backyard. It's the coolest thing. And so I fell in love with it. And then when I moved to Columbus, Indiana, I took a class out of I. And when we got to the Civil War time period, I just knew it because I was, kind of raised around it. I knew it so well. So I talked to my history teacher about it all the time. And there were a few times that he'd be like, I don't know what this is. Can you tell me what it is? And I'd tell him what it was before class started. And he was just a big inspiration to me. And he was one that always encouraged that part of history, especially for me, because it was the only thing that came easy to me, I guess. And then when I was growing up, I used to have all these like reoccurring dreams all the times. It started when I moved to the plantation. And I guess maybe being around that history so much kind of gets into your head. But I'd have these dreams where I was like actually in a battle. But it was almost like it grew up with me because the older that I got, the more realistic they became. And the more that it wasn't just like, camping around a campfire, it was actual fighting. So I kept having those dreams and I would wake up like so freaked out by them. There was even one point that I was like throwing up when I woke up because it was just so surreal to me. Like I really don't know how to put it into words, which is terrible because I'm a writer, so I should be able to. So I'd have those dreams and they haunted me for a long time. And then finally, it was just between my teacher and everything else that I was surrounded by. I was like, you know what? I think what I need to do is I need to start writing about it. And that's where a lot of my inspiration for the book also came from was those dreams. And that's the only way that I could get them to stop because it was almost like God wanted me to do that. if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that's like crazy. I know.
No, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. One of the biggest things that strikes me is just, I think I'm surprised, even after having talked to you a few times, I'm surprised by your passion specifically for the Civil War. So I know you've
Yeah.
got a passion for writing and this story that you want to tell. I didn't realize you had such an independent passion for the Civil War. So has the passion for writing always been there too, or has the writing been secondary to the need you feel to explore the Civil War?
No, that definitely came after. I can tell you right
Okay.
now, if I was 16 again and if you said that I was writing a book, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. I'm not doing that. Because I was just so terrible at English. I told you, history is the only thing that I can understand and I could get right. When it came to English, I feel like every single essay I did, it just came right back to me. My teacher's like, redo it. And it was over and over again. And because of that, it just like it gets in your head, especially when you're in high school, like that's not for me, like I need to find something else. And so that definitely came after. It was one of those things that when those dreams kept coming and I knew like I'd write them out just as like a therapeutic type of thing so that I could actually sleep, another night. And then it just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I wonder what would happen if I actually did something with all of this. And then I moved down here and I became a part of so many different clubs. I met amazing people such as yourself. Because of that, it almost like made my heart blossom to it and open up to it. And then I fell in love with writing after that. So it was very odd. But again, like I just had to follow God's lead on that and just see where the road takes me.
That's incredible. I would certainly be able to identify with the idea that I guess writing isn't the first passion. Like there's something that comes before it, and then writing is the outlet for it. So, one thing that is really interesting to me, I'm actually reading a book right now about how writing is healing. Do you see, like, is there a healing process going on? Is there, um, like, why you called it therapy? Tell me more about why writing about the Civil War is therapy for you.
A lot of times, whenever I get to a point where, let's say, like I'm working or something and I'm stressed out, my brain almost reverts back to what is my next chapter going to look like? How am I going to write that out? Because it's my way of almost escaping from whatever's going on. Because I know that that is something that my brain actually understands completely because it's entirely made up from my mind. And it's also something that I feel is fulfilling in some sort of way because I get to study all this history and I get to share it with everybody else. And I try to do it in a way that's not so boring because I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I even pick up like a Civil War book and I'm like, so I try to do it in a, in more of like a fiction type of way that still gets the point across. So it's fulfilling to me. It's an escaping for me. And it's inspiring because being able to know all the people that came before me and being able to see so many of the struggles that they had that I can relate to, it's like you get that mindset of, well, they got through it, so can I.
So, yeah, you talk about picking up a Civil War book, right? What's missing from a Civil War book that's there in a novel? Well, what's there in a novel is the characters and the journeys they go through. And I know you have a bit of a story about that. So tell me about the characters of this book. Tell me about your inspiration for them and what you're trying to do with them. Have they served as some sort of therapy for you as well?
Oh my gosh, yes. Talking about my characters is my favorite thing ever because I actually, on my other wall over here, I have a portrait of my main character. So a lot of my characters are background characters, but it focuses on the protagonist who's Henry and then his best friend Danny. Henry's character came actually from the dreams. The dreams that I would have as a kid, I guess you could say like I was Henry in the dreams. It was like the things that he's going through is stuff that I would dream about, but it was like I was the first person in that dream, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where his character started off at. But his best friend, Danny, is actually a parallel to my best friend growing up. He's goofy, outgoing, just kind of like isn't scared of anything, just wants to jump into it and see what happens. Whereas Henry's a little bit more like maybe we shouldn't just run off and join the Confederacy. Like maybe we should actually think it all through. So they balance one another. Danny inspires Henry to keep going, and Henry makes sure Danny doesn't get killed. Pretty much is the balance between them. And their characters have been inspired so many different ways by actual stories from the Civil War. One of them is Edward Francis Demerson, and he was a soldier who died when he was 16. And he doesn't have much story to him, but his portrait has been known to resonate with people because it shows how young these boys were when they went into the army. And that kind of explains where Henry and Danny's coming into it. They're joining this with that naive mindset of being basically a boy and not having any life outside of their little environment on prairie. And then traveling all the way up to another state and being like surrounded by all different types of people and seeing what the battles look like and how it changes them. And I really do feel like Henry and Danny have been there for me in some of the most complicated points of my life because there's so many parts of me that I've put into these characters also. And there's a lot that I've almost feel like I've gotten from them. I don't know. Sometimes some of the jokes that I'd write out for Danny, I accidentally say, and then I'm like, I know exactly where that came from. It's like you have a little voice inside of your head. So they've inspired me too. And they feel like actual people in my head because they're inspired by so many actual stories and so many actual people that once existed.
Can you explain a little bit about getting in the headspace? It's a very dark headspace of a boy who has been ripped off the prairie and,
Mhm.
knows nothing really about the world, but he's thrown into this horrific event. I know that when you write characters and you have to get in that headspace, I mean, it can affect you. So anything you could share about that, the challenges of it, maybe how it's enlightened you.
So it is very difficult. It is challenging for me, especially. One thing that I've struggled with is just the fact that they're boys and I'm not. And so sometimes it's hard to think like a guy. And I have tried. I have really tried sometimes. I will talk to any man that I know and I'll be like, okay, can you explain this for me, how you see it? Because I feel like the way that I see things are a little bit more feminine. That's a whole struggle in itself. But again, he's 20 years old in this, and he leaves his family behind. And I was 19 when I left mine. And so I understand how much it kind of takes out on you. And it makes me even more grateful now for having the technology that we do, whereas he didn't, where he'd go months without hearing from his family, where I can just pick up my phone. But still, on those nights that, I'm home alone and I'm just kind of missing like my mom or my grandma or my friends from back home. It's like that heartache that you get that you can compare to someone who had to leave their family. Different circumstances, of course, different times, different environments, but nevertheless, it's that heartache of leaving everything. So I try to really this is probably not good for my own mental sake, but I really try to dwell in it as much as I can and almost try to pick it apart and be like, oh, why am I feeling this way? What is that coming from? What do I miss about my family? What do I miss about my hometown? What is hard for me in Louisiana compared to Indiana? Those sort of things is what I use in Henry and Dan. And aside from that, I guess the unimaginable heartache that they go through seeing these terrible things, I think back to the most terrifying times in my life or the most unpredictable times in my life where I didn't know something was going to happen. I didn't know how it was going to happen. And what I try to do is I try to think of the fear that I might have had and almost amplify it. And that's where imagination comes in.
So, kind of going back to your passion about the Civil War in general, and part of your process of writing this book, one of the coolest things that I see that you do is you go to all these Civil War battle sites. So tell me about
Yeah.
that. Tell me about actually going and you're feeling the battleground. I mean, you are walking the grounds, you're in the trees, you're looking down the hill. So tell me what that's like and how that helps the writing.
Before I moved to Louisiana, I had never been to like a reenactment before. I want to see as many as I can. I want to go to as many as I can. I want to learn the stories of it. I want to walk the grounds of it. I want to be back in that time period. And that's the closest way that I can. And so when I moved down here, I was originally looking for ways that I could kind of network and get to know people that have similar interests as mine, not just in writing, but in history and ones that might be able to kind of help me fit in better down here that could help me be like, hey, there's this club or there's these people that you might get to know that love the same things that you do. And so that's kind of where it started at. But yeah, so I started going, I went to my first reenactment. And when I went out there, I actually was kind of working it. I would work in the office with like the park manager just kind of monitoring everything, making sure no kids ran out in the middle of like a battle scene. So I thought it was the coolest thing. And I just felt like when I was out there, I'm like, man, these people, they actually understand me on a whole other level because not many people, especially in their 20s, are the biggest fan of this. And so it's hard to find someone who's like, yeah, let's go dress up like it's the 1800s and go out in the heat and stay out there for the next 12 hours, you know? But yeah, it's just so cool. And then I would go out to the battlefields and I'd do some of the reenactments. And then I've made it a point anytime I travel, I got to stop at a battlefield. Like if I am in a state and if there's a good battlefield, even a small one, I'm stopping. All the way up to Indiana when I went in May for my uncle's wedding, I drove it and I stopped at every one that I could, especially like Shiloh and all that, stopped all the way down. And it really is just, it's so neat. And if you just kind of go out into a field and let's say they have like a cannon or something set up, and you just kind of think to yourself, it's the 1800s. Forget about the phone in your back pocket. Forget about whatever politics are going on. Just think to yourself, it's like 1862 right now. And if you look around, there's not usually a city nearby. There's nobody else with you most of the time. It's just the fields. And so you can really actually start to see it in your head because your brain's like, well, yeah, it's not like there's, tropical smoothie over there, like it's kind of isolated most of the time. So it's just so neat, especially the battles that Henry and Danny go into. I paid extra close attention to the environment, how it felt. And I was lucky enough that when I went out to Yorktown in Virginia, it was about the same time of year that they did. So I could kind of compare how the weather and
Right.
stuff was, being able to see it and feel it. It's fantastic.
That is incredible, and that's such a gift to be able to do that, to put it on the page for readers. You answered one of my questions, which was going to be, have you visited the sites that your boys go to? And it sounds like at least a couple. So are all the major battles? Have you been able to make it out to all their major engagements?
No, and I hate myself that I haven't been. I went to Yorktown and I was actually going out for my cousin's wedding. And my other cousin was there, and I had one day before I had to get on my flight back to Louisiana. And I said to him, I want to go to Yorktown. And he's like, well, let's do it. And my mom came with us too. She drove all the way from Indiana. So the three of us go out to Yorktown. We're looking at everything. And at the time, I was still trying to figure out what battles Henry goes through because he's based off of an actual infantry. And I'm trying to keep it as accurate as I can. So it's not like I just chose any battles. But I hated myself like 2 months later because when I finally got it all figured out, I also missed like Williamsburg that was up there and it was 15 minutes down the road from where I was at one point. I hated myself, but it's so hard. Like you almost have to make like a whole trip dedicated to only that. So there's still so many that I have to go to, but I would love to go see like Seven Pines up in Virginia. That's another one that Henry goes to. But Yorktown was pretty neat nevertheless, especially when I'm watching Hamilton and they start talking about Yorktown and I'm like, "Oh, I went there for different reasons." It wasn't a Revolutionary War, but it's still kinda cool.
Do you have any trips planned right now? Like, are you gonna hit a couple of these battlefields?
As of right now, not really. So, like, I just got engaged and we've been talking about whenever we go to do, like, the honeymoon, actually going up the East Coast and being able to see, like, where the Revolutionary War sites happened and Civil War sites because he loves the Revolutionary War, I love Civil War. It's a great combination. So, we've kinda talked about planning, like a 2-week trip just to hit them all on that one side.
That is so nerdy in the absolute best way. I love it. I hope
Oh,
y'all
yeah,
get to do that.
entirely.
Okay, so aside from your love of history, and maybe that is the biggest thing, but what are you most excited about, or what do you most want readers to get out of your novel whenever it's finished and it's published? Like, what are you hoping for in terms of a reader experience?
Man, these questions are great. I think the biggest misconception with the Civil War is, well, it's just about slavery. You have the North and you have the South, and that's it. And there's like that division. But I don't see it that way. It wasn't just the North and the South. It wasn't just someone from Indiana fighting someone from Louisiana, for example. You have people in the same household who were like, I'm going to go enlist in the Union and I'm going to go enlist in the Confederacy. And I mean, brother against brother is really what it was. And the men that fought in it, they did it for all different reasons. And some of them might have had some sort of relationship plantation. They wanted to keep slavery. Sure, that could have been one reason. But a majority of the time, the people in the Confederacy, like Henry and Danny, they didn't have slaves and they didn't have really any connection to it, but they did have their home and they did have their city. But I just think being able to get people to just take a step back and kind of see it from the side that we don't really hear about as much, being able to just get people to see that the 1860s were a lot more than just North versus South. That's kind of my objective, is I want people to be able to see it. I see it.
Okay, tell us about the status of the novel. First of all, what's it called? I don't remember if you ever told me what it's called.
Okay, so I've never publicly admitted the title, but I'll do it here right now. So the title is A Fight of Two Battles because it does focus on PTSD, especially. So it's kind of like the battle that they're going through physically and then the battle that they're going into with their mind. I've been working on it. It'll be 2 years come this February. I've kind of been jumping all over. So I have it all planned out. As you know, I have a big binder that I have everything laid out. It's like the whole skeleton of it, which actually I have my binder. I figured I've had to bring it. This is the binder.
Yes.
I'm known for binders, as you know, but so yeah, I spent a long time doing that. So I
This is
have it
very
all laid out.
impressive. I've seen it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'd say I'm probably about halfway through it right now. I'm thinking it's probably still going to take me probably another year until the like first draft of it is finished. And then I'd say like few more months to a year till I'm done editing. But I did start editing because sometimes I get a little bit bored and I'm like, let me jump back to the beginning and start editing those. So some of it's edited and some of it's not.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Whenever I get stuck at a spot, I edit what I've already written. I think a lot of writers probably do that. It's a healthy way to clean up your work. Okay,
Yeah,
a tale of
absolutely.
two battles, a fight of two battles. Okay, I was thinking
Yes.
tale of two cities, but a fight of two battles. That's okay, very interesting. So the PTSD, is this what's going
Mhm.
to happen in the I don't want to get too spoilery, but is this what you deal
No,
with in
you're
the
good.
second half of the novel?
Yes. In the beginning, when they go to Yorktown and when they go to Williamsburg, they're kind of on the outskirts of the battle, but it's almost even more terrifying to them because they're like, we're watching this, but we can't do anything. And it starts to kind of get into their head. I'll try not to spoil too much. There's also something that happens at Yorktown that still haunts Henry even now that he's like 3 battles in. After about Williamsburg, they start fighting and their anxiety and the PTSD that they start to develop just takes different forms. And it becomes something it's constantly revolving, it's constantly adding to itself, it's changing all the time because of their environments and because they just keep getting more and more without dealing with it, any of it, really. They're not working through it because they don't even know what it is. And it just escalates on a whole other way. And it changes their personalities entirely to where they're almost unrecognizable.
Could you tell me a little more? Please don't share anything more than you're comfortable with, but I'd be really interested to hear more about why the PTSD elements and like why that matters to you and why it's such a central point of this story.
So, like I said in the beginning of this call, so many parts of my life led me to this moment. I first became introduced with PTSD when I was 6 years old. My mom, she used to work at a prison when I was a kid. And when I was 6 years old, I got home one day from school and my mom had been assaulted really bad. She had a lot of problems coming back from it. And in the first year or so, she couldn't really take care of herself that much because her head had a lot of like brain damage. I kind of learned to, help take care of her and also kind of learn this new mom that I had because so many things started to bother her and she would have all these different symptoms that I didn't really quite understand. Like, for example, one of the things that I learned was like we go to a grocery store and which normally she was okay with before this point. But then it got to the point if there were too many people, if it was too loud, she couldn't have people walking behind her. It was that stuff would just kind of set her off and she'd get freaked out and all. So as a kid, I had to kind of learn how to avoid all of that and try to help her in any way that I could. So that's the first time that I became introduced to it. And then she went to therapy and she told me like what she had was PTSD and she kind of walked me through exactly what it was and how she got it and also how to try not to trigger it while she was working through it all. And I was a little bit like I've heard the term before at this point because I have a uncle who was in Vietnam, but it was something that I never really put two and two together that you don't have to be in the military to get it. So then after that, I moved to Indiana when I was 12 and I started working at the American Legion. I have a lot of military in my family, so it's something that, I enrolled under my grandfather and me and my grandma would go probably 4 times a week and I'd work bingo nights or work in the kitchen, different events, different fundraising, all that. And there again, I was introduced to it, and that was for more the military. A lot of the people that I worked with were Vietnam veterans who had PTSD, and a lot of them, like, they didn't want to talk about it. They wouldn't even talk about their time in the service. It was just, you kind of had to tiptoe around some of it and piece it together without ever actually asking them things, if that makes sense. So again, it was one of those things though that I kind of knew what to do because of my mom. So a lot of the strategies that I learned, like not being too close to them or something, or watching what you're saying to them, I also would kind of display when I was talking with a lot of these veterans. And then finally, when I was 17, I became the department junior president of Indiana for the American Legion Auxiliary. And I had to do a presidential project. And this was also tying into my senior project for school. And I worked with an organization in Southern Indiana. Then they did memorial rides and stuff to try to get money to train canines to work with veterans with the PTSD. And at that chapter in my life is when I didn't just know PTSD from being surrounded by people who had it, but I started to study the science behind it. I started to do research papers on how it develops, how it's misdiagnosed, and the different side effects of it, the different personalities that can come of it. I really got to dive in deep, and this group that I was a part of was actually called Cody Forest PTSD, and they really helped me understand how it escalates from step one to, unfortunately, a lot of times, how it ends in someone getting hurt. All of that gave me more knowledge about it in a way that I never would have imagined that I could be able to kind of display into Henry and Danny to help people understand.
It sounds like, yet again, kind of like your love for the Civil War. I mean, it's a passion. So you've got these two great passions kind of fueling this work. And I'm really excited to read it. Well, if people are interested, people want to follow you, tell us where we go. I don't think you have a website. You have Facebook. Is that it?
Do you have Facebook? I don't have a website yet. Everyone's telling me I need to get a website. Thinking about it. Maybe when I get something else published. But yeah, I do have a Facebook, and it's Arianna Brindle, Brindle with a B, spelled like the color, Brindle. Everyone gets that wrong, so I figured I'd just spell it, and then just comma writer after that. And yeah, I'm really bad at posting anymore, but I promise I'm still active on. I mean, there's so many things that I wanted to talk to you about. Like, do you feel like whenever you're thinking about your next book, you ever like feel like, man, I know this really well, or I know where I want to go with it. And then you kind of look back on your life and it's almost been there the whole time, but you never saw it.
Kind of, kind of. The realization that there's something that's been there the whole time is something that I definitely have experienced in writing. So, I asked a little bit about writing as healing, and I think that's where I am right now for a lot of reasons. The interview I recently did with a website called Legend Fiction, we talked about writing as healing. I'm reading a book about it, and I'm realizing more, especially with the story I'm writing right now. There's so much about my experiences, my pains, my joys, my accomplishments, my failures. And actually now I'm more consciously mining that, which is kind of healing. It is therapeutic.
Yeah.
So kind of looking and seeing that there's been some path leading toward this story, this character, I've definitely experienced that.
So this is something I've always wondered about. And maybe it's because all I've ever actually written was like historical fiction. And so like I've always kind of had, I guess it's almost easier and not easy at the same time. Sorry, my cat's back. But it's almost like I kind of have a layout for me before I even get started. Because there's so many things to be historically accurate that I have to take into consideration. But with fantasy, do you try to stick to anything realistic, or how do you like to do that?
I'm the type of writer who likes to have all my stuff feel fairly grounded. I like it to feel relatable. I don't want people to drop into my world and feel like they don't know how the world works. So this was a huge thing with me with my first novel is I wanted you to be able to drop into that novel and understand everything, but at the same time have it be fantastic. So I do like to create it all from scratch. You asked about that. I like to keep it simple, but it needs to feel very grounded and relatable.
So on an equivalent to like a reenactment, Have you ever been to like Renaissance Fair or anything like that?
No, and I've never been to a Civil War reenactment. I don't know if I should be ashamed of that since I live in Louisiana. The way you said it earlier, I was like, "Oh, I've never been to one."
Well, I mean, I feel like if you don't have a grandpa that's obsessed with it, or if you yourself are not obsessed with it, like it's not something that just comes to mind easily. Well, so how many books have you published now?
Yeah, I haven't published any. I've been signed to an agency and we've been pitching my first book. We have a few full requests out to publishers right now. And it's been a while. We were kind of going slow for a while. We hit some of the big fantasy publishers up. We didn't have any luck with them. So we pitched a bunch of kind of moderate size publishers maybe about a month ago and we got several hits. So I'm hopeful, but if it doesn't happen sometime soon, self-publish and then we'll pitch the second one, which is a sequel, but it could also be a standalone. I'm writing that one right now.
That's awesome. So you have
That's the
your
one
own
that's set in
agent.
the South Pacific. Yes. Well, she's not just mine. She has several clients, but yes, I have an agent.
No, 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 no. I figured so, but like I think it's such an impressive thing to get an agent. And I know you've done like you did a presentation with Bayou Writers. That's when I went to Virginia. So I was too busy up in Yorktown with my cousin when you did that presentation. I'm sorry. But I remember you did the presentation on that. And I think that's such a to me at least, like I'm still in the process of writing my book, and that's something that kind of terrifies me because I know it's coming and it's something I want to do. I want to try to do traditional before I do self publishing, but I feel like it's such a terrifying experience. Do you think it was when you were going through it?
Well, it's traumatic. It's I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but it is a challenge. It's requires a lot of patience, and it is as much about luck as it is about your book being good. And by luck, I mean you have to fit the tastes of the people looking for books right now. And they may have a personal taste they don't want to represent because they don't think it can sell right now. So like in the fantasy world at the moment, everybody's real into romantasy, right? Romance, fantasy, and that's fine. But I didn't write romantasy. So there's a certain amount of air in the room sucked up by people that want to represent romantasy. So it makes it, if you're writing something like mine, it's, maybe a little bit tougher to get it looked at even. So there's that. There's the challenge of getting an agent. But then after that, it takes a while, and then you have to start pitching publishers with your agent. You send it, you wait for months. Yeah, I've been pitching for a couple of years now. And there's just so much rejection, for one reason or another. But it's hard, and you just have to know going into it. If you want to do it, it's going to take time, patience, and a lot of rejection. But I've learned a lot. Like I said, my agent's great. I've learned a lot. I've enjoyed it.
Well, it does make me wonder. So you're still steps ahead of me. So if you were, let's say, at my point right now, is there anything that you can tell me or like anyone else who is at kind of like they're still writing it and they haven't even tried getting an agent or anything? Is there anything that you wish you would have known at this point rather than the point that you're at now?
I think sobriety about what it really would take to get an agent, kind of what I just told you, is one thing. The other thing is knowing that your work is not going to be a fit for everyone. I think I had this kind of naive desire for my book to make everybody happy, and I tried to
Mhm.
write it like that too, which I still do. I really enjoy the challenge of trying to write for the broadest audience I can while also writing what I want to write. I think it's fun. I used to write music, and that's how I did music too. I wanted to write for everyone, but it had to resonate with me at a very deep level. And I love that challenge. I think it's fantastic. But there are people that are just not going to get what you're doing. There are people that have read my book. A lot of people really like it, and there's a couple people that will criticize it. And when you read their criticism, some are fair. I don't want to say that they're all like this, but you can tell that they're not on the same page with you. They don't understand what you're trying to do. They don't not how their brain works, and that's fine. There's always going to be a chunk of people that don't appreciate what you did, and it's just not their taste. And it doesn't necessarily reflect poorly on you.
I think that's where a lot of people almost become discouraged with writing is they know all those trials and they know all the heartache that comes out of it, especially when the adrenaline of wow, I'm writing a book. When that starts to wear off, you're kind of left with the pieces of it. And then you start hearing criticism, you start hearing the feedback, you start seeing how many doors you thought might open and they never do. And then you just have to figure out new ways
Mhm.
constantly. And I feel like that's one thing, at least for me, that's why I try to do reenactments. That's why I try to keep researching, to keep reminding me of why I want to do this, why I love this so much. So I feel like that's definitely something that not a lot of people understand about writing until they get into it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly vulnerable, and I'm not someone who enjoys being vulnerable at all, but writing, I mean, it is vulnerable, especially the depth that you've described for your writing and the passion that's fueling it. I mean, you are opening yourself up, and
Yeah,
when you
for
write
sure.
like that and people don't like it, that's a dagger to the heart sometimes. But the talent I think and the skill to develop is sifting through the criticism and figuring out, when is this something I can use to make my writing better, and when do I need to put it aside because this person just doesn't understand what I'm going for. That's a real difficult skill to master, but if you can master that, then once the pain of being rejected, in a sense, your writing being rejected, once that has subsided, you can build something or create something that's better than it would have been otherwise.
Absolutely. And that's something I'm still struggling with, if I'm being honest. When I first got into writing, I remember when I first got into like writing groups, especially, I'd send stuff to them and I just go home and I cry because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, I'm never going to get, like, I felt like I was back in high school all over again. And my English teacher's like, redo it. Like, that's what it felt like. And it took me a long time.
Yeah, I think understanding who the people are that are critiquing your writing, that's very, very valuable. I think that's something I had to figure out as I had my first novel in particular read. If you look at my beta read or feedback spreadsheet, because I have one, I mean, I've got what's your age, man, woman, what do you read, what movies do you like? I tried to get so much information on them because if you understand the person, then you understand, how should I take this person's criticism.
I think that's all the questions I had anyway. So thank you so much. I just really enjoyed this.